I was born in 1976. There was approximately in 1976 there was approximately 2.8 million Jehovah's Witnesses, and my parents were two of them when I was born. So there was a big influx of members in 1975 because this was one of the times that they thought the world was going to end was in 1975, and my parents joined in 1975 expecting Armageddon to occur. So I grew up in the religion, immersed in the religion. Here's some pictures on the left is me and some other young people. We were out in field service. In the middle is me and my two younger sisters, and on the right, can you all see that, or is it hidden on the right?
Think we see that.
I think we see
Okay.
it.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think we see
Okay.
it. We see
Yep.
the whole picture of the four of you on the right side.
Perfect. Yep.
No,
That was
five.
5. Yep. So that's my parents, and I'm on the left, and my two younger sisters, and we spent a lot of time in dresses out in the field service. So, a few caveats about this. I don't have a very positive opinion of the Jehovah's Witnesses, but the people themselves, the members, they are some of the nicest people you will ever meet. They're extremely friendly. They're kind. They're welcoming. A lot of them were victims, and I can't hold that against them. Both my parents and my youngest sister are still Jehovah's Witnesses, and I left. Actually over 20 years ago now, since I've been a Jehovah's Witness. So a lot of the things that I know from growing up has changed. They have something called New Light, and every time they have a new revelation, they say from God. It comes down from the governing body. They have a hierarchy of uh, elders who sit at the top, and the governing body will have new insights on the scriptures that they claim to receive from Jehovah, and they call this new light. So a lot of the things change. In fact, something that's very recently changed is their view on disfellowshipping. They've loosened it a little bit, probably in response to some lawsuits that they've had regarding disfellowshipping. And a lot of this is my opinion. Just to be clear, they don't have a chance, obviously, to refute some of this. So, take it with a grain of salt. Jehovah's Witnesses think they are the only Christian religion, the only true Christian religion. They were founded, if you go all the way back in about 1875 or so, there was a group of people called the Russellites. And they were Bible students. They thought that traditional Christianity didn't have a full understanding of the Bible. They thought the end of the world was going to come in 1914. They expanded from that into the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, and then they became the Jehovah's Witnesses after a big convention where they decided to go out and become evangelical. So today you see Jehovah's Witnesses, you might meet them at your door. You'll often see them standing outside of bus stops or outside of large convention halls or organizations with a stand where they hand out their Watchtower and Awake magazines. They're actually a cousin to the Mormons. Mormons were an offshoot of, if you go all the way back, Mormons were an offshoot of this, and the Seventh-day Adventists are also an offshoot of the Russellites. So, they have some kind of cousins that have similar beliefs. There's about 8.8 million Jehovah's Witnesses now, and they all try to hold themselves removed from the world. They don't vote. They don't participate in the military in any form. They don't hold government office. They consider these things to be against their religion. They are worldly. They don't participate in extracurricular activities at schools. They don't participate in work extracurricular activities. Say you have a softball team at your office, they wouldn't participate in that. They won't do anything that would allow them to be involved in the world at large. They're very insular. There's a lot of famous Jehovah's Witnesses. A lot of people who were raised as a Jehovah's Witness. Michael Jackson is a famous one. Dave Mustaine, who was the guitarist for Megadeth. Naomi Campbell. Michelle Rodriguez, Jerry Halliwell, Donald Glover. These are all famous people who were raised Jehovah's Witnesses and left. Donald Glover's now famously an atheist. Dwight Eisenhower was raised as a Russellite. He also left as an adult. Venus and Serena Williams are still active Jehovah's Witnesses. Serena Williams, in fact, my middle sister, when she was pregnant with her first child, was accepted. I cannot remember the name of the medication, but she accepted a medication because she had a condition while she was pregnant, and this medication was grown in blood cells, and she was counseled very heavily for having done this. And Serena Williams, we were talking about this recently. Serena Williams was also given the same medication and obviously not counseled for it because she's a little more famous. So there's some discrepancies in how certain people are treated. Prince, Naomi Campbell, and Evelyn Mace all later became Jehovah's Witnesses. So they didn't start out as Jehovah's Witnesses, they were converted. Prince is an interesting case because his life was very antithetical to what a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses believe, and yet he would often be seen out going door to door in his later years. All right, so Jehovah's Witnesses, what are they? They are we'll go through all of these things. They have some pretty unique tenets of belief that are not that similar to other religions. They have some other things that set them apart from your traditional everyday, Christian or Hindu or other religions. They are creationists. While they're not young earth creationists, they have a lot of gymnastics that they do to explain why the Bible says 7 days or 6 days to create the earth. They say obviously a day is longer for God than it is for humans, so it's not actually, they don't actually believe in young earth creationism, but they do believe that the flood wiped out the dinosaurs. So this is kind of an interesting conundrum that they have. So they believe the great flood came and killed out the dinosaurs. It's a literal thing that happened. Most of the Bible they treat very literally. The only thing they don't treat literally is the 6 days. I'm not sure who came up with that, why they came up with that. The sort of founding belief, the main belief of the Jehovah's Witnesses is that Armageddon is coming. We are living in the last days. Armageddon is going to come, and only the people who are true Jehovah's Witnesses, true Christians will survive Armageddon. Anyone who has died before Armageddon comes will go into sort of a holding pattern. They don't believe in a soul, they don't believe in a soul that survives death. In fact, they believe you die. When you die, you die, and you will be recreated after Armageddon if you're dead. And when you are, if you died as a true Christian, as a Jehovah's Witness, then you'll just, continue to live. If you died before you were able to find out about the true Christianity, Jehovah's Witnesses, then you'll be given a chance to decide, hey, I could stay here and live forever, which I would imagine most people would do given that choice. They think it's going to happen any day now. When I was a young girl, we lived constantly with the fact that Armageddon was going to come, I mean, any day. There was no way I was ever going to see high school. And then there was no way I was ever going to, live into my adulthood. I was never going to have children. I was never going to find a husband. And then, there was no way the year 2000 was going to come. They've believed this since the time of the Russellites. They thought it was 1914. They thought it was 1918. They thought it was 1932. They thought it was 1975. And then they realized that having these specific dates wasn't really working. So now they became a little more amorphous with the timeline. It became the generation born in 1914 would not pass away before the end of the world. And now, obviously, no one born in 1914 is still alive. There might be a couple people. But now it's become, the people who are aware of 1914 and what happened in that year, that won't pass out of memory before Armageddon. But they still believe it's coming any day. I've recently spoke with my mother, and she's still, obviously that we believe this world is at its end of time. There's no way it can continue on. So after Armageddon, everyone lives in paradise forever on earth, except for 144,000 people. Jehovah's Witnesses will live in harmony and peace. Animals won't harm each other. So the lion will lie down with the lamb is a scripture in the Bible. They take that very literally. They think that animals won't attack and eat each other anymore, that they will live in harmony. Humans will live together in harmony. I had many discussions with my father because a lot of it doesn't make logical sense. He would think, he would ponder things like, because my father could not carry a tune in a bucket, for example. He would ponder if maybe after Armageddon, when we're all perfect, would he perhaps be able to sing and carry a tune? He thought this was possible for him. So they have, strange, they have a fascinating, I should say, ability to hold some very contradictory ideas in their head at the same time, which is kind of a trait that a lot of members of these high control groups have, the ability to hold something that seems completely, contrary to something else at the same time. And it makes sense in their mind. The 144,000 are a group of what they call anointed. And this all comes from the book of Revelations, where they take a lot of this very literally as well, the vision that John had, visions, plural, that John had. The 12 tribes of 12,000 referenced in Revelations are referring to people who were true Christians, again, Jehovah's Witnesses, who will live in heaven with Jesus and rule over the entire earth. So while almost everyone is living on earth in harmony with all of the animals and all of the people, they will be living forever in heaven. Another thing they take very literally and very seriously is a lot of the prophecies about the wild beast. There's a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. This changes quite frequently, but they often have specific countries that are referred to by these 10 horns. Initially, the League of Nations was this beast represented the League of Nations back before there was a United Nations. It became the United Nations. Then it became kind of just the world organization. One thing that's kind of stays true the whole time is that false religion is the harlot. So they believe the harlot is riding on top of this government back, and they're in concert. And when that beast turns on false religion, that signals the end of the world. That signals Armageddon. So interestingly, a lot of the countries that like the the USSR was one of them, which no longer exists. So when I was a child, the USSR and the United States were featured heavily in a lot of the talks that I heard. I don't know who they think now are represented by these horns, but I'm pretty sure it's changed. Um, the no blood transfusions is another one that they take very seriously. It is one of the most serious sins against God you can commit is to accept a blood transfusion. This is actually one of the things that first made me actually question the religion as a young adolescent, and realize that it made no sense. But they believe that blood is precious to Jehovah, and you can't accept blood from anyone else. There's been hundreds of court cases fought on behalf of children who were denied blood transfusions by their Jehovah's Witness parents. Fortunately, frequently they win if the lawsuits are brought in time. But it's a dangerous belief that they hold. Unlike some of the other ones, this one is actually life-threatening in cases. Because and I almost wonder if some of the Jehovah's Witnesses in these situations are hoping that the government will side against them. So, meetings and assemblies. This is a typical Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall. They're called Kingdom Halls. Growing up, we met 3 times a week. Sunday, there was a 2-hour Bible meeting. They had a talk that they gave, and then they had a watchtower study, which ultimately consisted of reading the paragraph. They would ask a question, and you would literally read back the highlighted answer. There was not a lot of in-depth discussion. It was almost a call and repeat, but it was a more clinical feel than you might find in a traditional church. Monday or Tuesday, you had what was called a book study. You would study a different book that the Watchtower Society put out, like the Revelation book that we saw pictures from, or the Creation book, or Life on Paradise Earth book. And it's a similar thing. They would read the paragraph, they would ask the question at the end, and you would read the highlighted. You might put it in your own words, but you're basically spitting out what you've just read. Thursday, they would have what was called this Theocratic Ministry School, where you would practice going out in service. These were all the talks were conducted by men, but women could participate in the Theocratic Ministry School because they would sit on stage, speak to each other, and put on like a little play of going out in service and talking to someone. So I would sit at a table, and the person across from me would pretend to be a worldly person, someone who is not a Jehovah's Witness, and I'm, for example, conducting a Bible study, and we would act it out. And then we would be graded on what we could do better. And then they would have a service meeting after that, which was information released from the governing body or from Bethel, or, some more insights into how to conduct the ministry. From my understanding, these meetings have cut down a little bit since when I grew up. This is just what I did when I was growing up. They also have a special Sing to Jehovah book. We'll see some of the song titles in a second. There's no iconography. There's just usually a quote at the front. You can see it in this picture. There's a lectern. There'll be a table on Thursday night for the Theocratic Ministry School. And that's pretty much it. There's no pictures unless they've printed a picture from one of the books that they have. There's no photographs. There's small windows. A few times a year, they have assemblies, which are large gatherings where they'll rent out a small stadium. Sometimes they build their own assembly halls that they keep up through contributions, and this will have all of the congregations in a surrounding area, like the greater Atlanta area, would all go and attend a convention. Then these conventions are where they release new books, new light, new insights, things like that. So if you're studying, if someone comes to your door and you agree to a Bible study, that's the first step. You're a Bible student at that point. And so publishers are the people who come to your door. They have to report or they did anyway, have to report how many hours they spend out every week proselytizing, publishing the news of Jehovah. You have to report how many watchtowers, awakes, how many publications you've placed with potential people. You have to report, we'd often report like different things on when we went door to door. Once you're baptized, you're a brother or a sister. So, as a young child, I would be known by my first name. Once I was baptized, I was Sister Austin. Um, Even though I was only 13, I was Sister Austin. And, you would address each other as brother and sister at that point. Ministerial servants are brothers. You have to be baptized, who may have a little bit higher responsibility, things like carrying microphones back and forth. They can conduct meetings, they can conduct prayers. Elders oversee the congregation. There's a group of elders, and then there's a overseer that has responsibility for a group of congregations. And then Bethel is where the governing body resides. That's where all of the decisions are made. Once you're baptized, you're in. So there's been some concern about the age that many Jehovah's Witness children are baptized at, because if you are baptized, you can be disfellowshipped for many, many reasons. You can be disciplined by the congregation for a number of reasons. And, children at the age of 12, 13, 14 aren't really ready to make lifelong commitments to a religion and organization. And, to then be held accountable for that is problematic. But if a brother or sister who has committed a sin, whatever it is, will have to meet with a judicial committee of elders. So there's a panel of elders who sit there. They judge if this person is repentant for their actions or if they are not repentant. They determine how serious the sin is. Was this a serious sin? Was this was this endangering other people in the congregation? For example, if you are at school, say you're a Jehovah's Witness who attends a public school, is this something that other Jehovah's Witnesses who attend the same school could hear about? It could unduly influence them, and this, might need to be addressed more seriously than someone who, for example, had an affair with his wife, but doesn't work with anybody else. So, it's not something that's going to be heard by the congregation at large, and it might not be as he might be reproved, whereas this person who is in a public school and had sex with someone, they may need to be disfellowshipped so that anybody, none of the other children will be influenced by this. Then there's different things. There's private reproval, where the elders will sit in judgment on you, but they understand that you are making reparations and trying to get yourself, closer to God and make amends. There's public reproval or marking, or whatever they call it now. This is where they will announce that a person is marked. Then everybody in the congregation knows that they've committed a serious sin. They don't know what it is, but they know that this person is trying to get back in the good graces of Jehovah and the rest of the congregation. There's disfellowshipping. When I was growing up, disfellowshipping meant that you cut off all communication with that person. You could not speak to them if you saw them in Walmart. You could not address them. if they were not a family member. If they were a family member, the only communication you could have with them was if it was a family matter that needed to be discussed. So that, my understanding is that's changed a little bit. They've loosened up. You can now speak to disfellowship people in certain circumstances, especially if they have come, for example, to a meeting and they want to no longer be disfellowshipped, then they're a little more lenient with their treatment of these disfellowship people. There is apostasy, however, and you still can't speak to an apostate. And an apostate is one who is disfellowshipped or disassociated, who has made it clear that they are anti-Jehovah's Witness. So we talked a little bit about going door to door. We would report our hours in field service. We had little territory map cards. That's what this is on the bottom left. So you, on the back side of that, there was always notes. So, don't go to this house. They have a mean dog. This house, they're extremely rude. This person was very friendly and could be interested. Be sure to call back on this person. We would leave watchtowers awakes. If there was a particular new tract that we had come out that we were promoting, we would do that. Pioneers, there was different levels of pioneers. You could do auxiliary, which is what we did in the summertime, because obviously during the school year we couldn't, but during the summer we could commit most of our free time to pioneering. So an auxiliary pioneer would pioneer for a month or two at a time, 30 to 50 hours. As a full-time pioneer, 70 hours a month. They would be out door to door, spreading the word of God. And a special pioneer was supported solely on donations, 130 hours. Again, these numbers have probably changed since. They have specific language that they use, like brother and sister. The Kingdom Hall, where we all met, the world, which is non-Jehovah's Witnesses, the new system, which is what happens after Armageddon. They called it the pure language. They all spoke the pure language, and it was kind of a lingo that everybody shared. And sing to Jehovah, they reinforced many of these beliefs with a special songbook. Loyally submitting to theocratic order was a great song that talked about how important it was to listen to the elders, to listen to, the governing body. Faithful women, Christian sisters talked about how great a model subservient women were to all the other women. There were lots of songs specifically addressing the end of the world, to continue to no, don't despair, the end is coming. And they're catchy. They're kind of like advertising jingles. What was it like? Again, this was just my experience. My parents were pretty strict and pretty devoted. Some were more so, some were less so. Obviously, the parents, for example, of Serena and Venus Williams were very lenient because, they grew up playing tennis and became famous for it. Others were a lot stricter. Parents are instructed to go to the schools, talk to the teachers, make sure the teachers understand that their children can't participate in holidays, can't participate in Christmas parties, anything like that. They cannot say the Pledge of Allegiance. They either remain sitting or they go out in the hall for the Pledge of Allegiance. They are creationists, so any classes like biology, for example, that might address evolution, children might need to leave for those classes. No extracurricular activities. Don't go spend time with anyone of the world. So that's what it was like. Kind of what they believed growing up, and I think it's probably similar in a lot of ways now. So what is it? Why is this relevant to people who are skeptics or who are not religious. Um, I got a couple quotes here that I really resonated with me growing up. The truth is inherently of value. There is no point in clinging to something that's not true. And I think that's probably true of anyone who considers themselves a skeptic or, a free thinker. The truth is more valuable than anything. And, like Sagan said one time, if it is untrue, it deserves to be proven so. Um, this is a book I came across recently, actually, by Stephen Hassan. He grew up or he didn't grow up, he converted rather to the Moonies, and then he left years later and turned it into he turned his experiences into a kind of a model for how these groups behave. Groups that try to control their members' behavior, the flow of information, try to control their thought processes, try to control emotional responses. These are more likely controlling groups, and these are more likely groups that are going to quash any independent thinking and try to be very insular and he's applied the same model to people who are particularly, you know, adherent followers of Trump. So, not necessarily anyone who voted for Trump, but the people who go to all of his rallies, who will believe anything he says, even though he's going to say something contrary 2 minutes later. These people tend to fall into this bottle more. And I found it a really useful way of looking at groups and especially political organizations. Is this something valuable, or is this something that maybe these people need some help in getting beyond this? And for me, books that had a huge impact on me were 1984, The True Believer by Eric Hoffer, and The Dragons of Eden by Carl Sagan. Um, and all of these people that I met in school, all the people I met in service, I might have discussions with people who would open my mind to something that I had never seen before as growing up. They all were kind of like putting chinks in a wall that had been built by the things that I grew up being taught. And eventually, I got through and I realized that there's no way this makes any sense. And it takes a lot of time. You never know what it is that you say that is going to impact people, but it all has an impact. And so I think it's incredibly valuable to continue talking to people, to express the truth, express, the fact that it's impossible that this is going to happen, but make sure that it's only the belief system that is external and not that person, because that person is inherently valuable. And often, if they're at that point, they've been misled and they are actually a victim themselves. And, you don't need to judge them for beliefs that they held. Just help them get beyond them. And when they're ready, they might actually do so. That is the end of my presentation.